Albert Einstein once famously said, "If the bee disappears from the surface of the earth, man would have no more than 4 years of life. No more bees, no more pollination, no more plants, no more animals, no more man." This quote is disputed. Some say Einstein never actually said it. But here is what is certain. Scientists are saying exactly that. Without bees, the planet's food chain would collapse completely within a few years. Meanwhile, bees are disappearing right now all over the world, and most people don't even think about it. Today, we are talking about a creature without whom life on Earth, as we know it, would be impossible. A creature that created a product that doesn't spoil for millennia. A creature capable of making collective decisions smarter than many human organizations. The bee. Part 1. What is a bee? Let's start with the scale. There are about 20,000 species of bees on the planet. 20,000. Most people only know one, the honeybee. The other 19,999 species live their own lives, either solitary or in small groups, pollinating plants, building nests in the ground, in stems, or in rock crevices, remaining virtually invisible to us. The honeybee, Apis mellifera, is the one raised by humans. It is native to Africa and Eurasia, but through thousands of years of human activity, it has spread all across the globe. This conversation will mostly focus on it. The bee is an insect. Class Insecta, order Hymenoptera, family Apidae. Its closest relatives are wasps and ants. This proximity is no accident. They are all social insects with highly organized colonies. The size of a worker honeybee is about 15 millimeters, and it weighs around 120 milligrams. This is a creature you could place on your thumbnail, and it would rest there, barely felt. Yet, it is part of one of the most complex biological systems ever to emerge on Earth. The bee's body consists of 3 sections: head, thorax, and abdomen. The head features compound facet eyes that allow them to see in the ultraviolet spectrum. Flowers that look monochromatic to us appear to bees as vibrant maps with landing strips leading straight to the nectar. Evolution made a deal. The flower signals the bee, and the bee carries the pollen. The bee's antennae are multifunctional sensors. They perceive odors, temperature, humidity, and air vibrations. A bee literally feels the world around itself continuously with its antennae. On their hind legs, they have pollen baskets, special depressions lined with stiff hairs along the edges. The bee brushes pollen off its body, moistens it with nectar, and presses it into the basket. A loaded bee flies with bright yellow or orange pellets on its hind legs. Those are pollen baskets packed to the limit. Only females, worker bees, and the queen have stingers. Drones, males, do not have a stinger at all. A worker bee's stinger is barbed like a fishhook. When it stings, it gets stuck in the skin, and as the bee flies away, it tears out part of its abdomen along with the stinger. This kills it. A bee stings only when there is no other choice, paying for it with its life. The queen, the only one of her kind in the hive, has a smooth stinger without barbs. She can sting multiple times without harming herself, but she does so very rarely, only under a direct threat or when fighting another queen. Part 2. The structure of the hive. A single hive is not just a pile of bees. It is a single organism. Biologists even use the term superorganism because the hive functions as a single living entity, where each bee performs the function of an individual organ. A typical hive contains 40,000 to 80,000 individuals, and in the height of summer, it can reach up to 100,000. Among them is one queen. Her sole function is reproduction. She lays up to 2,000 eggs per day, almost non-stop during the active season. A queen lives up to 5 years, which is a record of longevity for a bee family. Worker bees live for about 6 weeks in the summer. A few hundred are drones, males. Their only task is to fertilize a young queen. They do not work, do not gather nectar, do not guard the hive. They only eat and wait. In the autumn, when their role is fulfilled, the worker bees simply drive the drones out of the hive. With the cold outside, the drones perish. This is not cruelty. It is precise calculation. There is no reason to feed extra mouths during the winter. All the rest are worker bees, females with underdeveloped ovaries. They do everything: build honeycombs, gather nectar and pollen, produce honey, feed the larvae, maintain the hive temperature, guard the entrance, remove debris and dead bees, and produce wax and propolis. Most surprisingly, worker bees have a strict system of age-based professions. A young bee, just emerged from her cell, spends her first days cleaning cells, then becomes a nurse feeding the larvae, then a builder secreting wax, then a guard at the hive entrance. Only in the final 2 weeks of her life does she become a forager bee, flying out for nectar. Each bee knows what to do, without orders from above and without managers. The queen does not manage the hive in the conventional sense. She does not hand out commands. Control happens through chemical signals called pheromones, and through an amazing mechanism that deserves a separate mention: the waggle dance. In 1946, Austrian biologist Karl von Frisch discovered something incredible. Bees communicate through dance. A bee that has found a source of nectar returns to the hive and performs a dance on the honeycombs. The shape of the dance, its duration, and its angle relative to the vertical line encode 3 parameters: the direction to the source relative to the sun, the distance to it, and the quality of the food. Other bees observe the dance and find the specified location flawlessly. For this discovery, von Frisch received the Nobel Prize in 1973. Bees are among the few creatures on Earth that use a symbolic language to transmit information about remote objects, an ability we are used to considering exclusively human. Part 3. How bees make honey. Honey is not just a sweet substance. It is the result of a complex biochemical process that takes several weeks and requires the efforts of thousands of individuals. Nectar is the raw material. A forager bee sucks it out of a flower using its proboscis and places it into its honey stomach, a separate organ not connected to digestion. The honey stomach holds about 40 milligrams of liquid. To fill it, a bee visits between 100 and 1,500 flowers. Chemical transformation begins right inside the honey stomach. Special enzymes, primarily invertase, break down the sucrose of the nectar into glucose and fructose. This process continues inside the hive. Upon arrival, the forager bee transfers the nectar to a hive bee through a special exchange. The hive bee places it in its own honey stomach, processes it with enzymes, and passes it to the next. This chain can repeat several times. Gradually, the water content in the nectar drops from 80% to 20%. Then, the bees place the partially processed nectar into the honeycomb cells and begin to ventilate it by flapping their wings to create an air current. Evaporation continues. When the humidity drops to 18%, the honey is ready, and the bees seal the cell with a wax cap. To produce just 1 teaspoon of honey, a bee must fly a total distance equal to circling the Earth twice along the equator. More precisely, it takes about 120,000 kilometers of cumulative flight path and visits to roughly 2 million flowers. Over its 6-week lifespan, a single worker bee produces about 1/2 of a teaspoon of honey. If you eat a spoonful of honey, you are eating the lifetime results of 12 bees. Honey never spoils. Honey that was 3,000 years old was found in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs, and it was still edible. This is due to several factors. Very low moisture prevents bacteria and mold from multiplying. The acidic environment, pH around 3.5, is hostile to most microorganisms. Hydrogen peroxide is released by the enzyme glucose oxidase. Honey is a natural antiseptic with an unlimited shelf life. It has been used in medicine for thousands of years. Egyptians used it to treat wounds. During World War I, when medical supplies were scarce, honey was used as an antiseptic for dressings. Modern research confirms that honey, especially Manuka honey, is effective against a number of bacterial infections resistant to antibiotics. Part 4. What else do bees produce? Honey is just one of the things bees give to the world, and perhaps not even the most important. Wax. Worker bees secrete it through special glands on their abdomen. To produce 1 kilogram of wax, bees must consume about 8 kilograms of honey. Wax is the building material of the hive, but it has also been used by humans for millennia for candles, cosmetics, medicinal ointments, polishes, fabric and leather waterproofing, and food preservation. Propolis, a resinous substance that bees collect from the buds and bark of trees and mix with enzymes. In the hive, it is used as an antiseptic and building material. Bees use it to seal cracks, coat walls, and neutralize foreign objects. If a mouse gets into the hive and the bees cannot pull it out, they coat the carcass with propolis, creating a natural mummification. Without propolis, the decomposing mouse would infect the entire hive. Propolis contains over 300 biologically active compounds. In medicine, its antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal properties are highly valued. Studies show effectiveness against certain types of cancer in laboratory settings, though clinical trials are ongoing. Royal jelly, a special substance produced by the glands of young worker bees. They feed it to all larvae for the first 3 days, but a larva chosen to become a queen receives royal jelly throughout its entire development without restrictions. And this is the only thing that differentiates a queen from a worker bee. Genetically, they are identical. The difference lies solely in their diet. A queen lives for 5 years, while a worker bee lives for 6 weeks. The queen is twice as large, and her ovaries are fully developed. All of this is the result of royal jelly, not genetics. Royal jelly contains a unique protein called royal actin, which triggers the hormonal cascade leading to the development of a queen. This is one of the most studied examples of epigenetics, where it is not the genes, but their expression that determines what an organism will become. Bee venom, apitoxin. When stung, about 0.1 milligrams of venom enters the bloodstream. For most people, this is a minor irritation, but for individuals with allergies, it can be life-threatening. Apitoxin contains melittin, its most studied component. Research shows that it possesses anti-inflammatory properties and is being studied as a potential agent against certain viruses and tumors. Apitherapy, treatment with bee venom, has been practiced for thousands of years. Modern medicine approaches it with caution, but research continues. Here's the first question for you. Have you ever used bee products for medicinal purposes? Honey, propolis, royal jelly? Write in the comments. Part 5. Pollination. Why is there no food without bees? This is the most important thing bees do. Not honey, but pollination. About 80% of all flowering plants on Earth depend on insect pollination, and the majority of them rely on bees. Roughly 1/3 of all the food consumed by humanity exists thanks to bee pollination. Let's look at the specifics. Apples, pears, cherries, sweet cherries, apricots, peaches, plums, all require pollination by bees. Cucumbers, zucchini, pumpkins, bees. Almonds depend on bees by 90%. Strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, bees. Coffee, bees. Cacao, bees. Sunflowers, bees. Cereal crops like wheat, rice, and corn are pollinated by the wind and do not depend on bees. These represent those few years that humanity could theoretically survive on bread and rice alone, without fruits, vegetables, nuts, chocolate, and coffee. But that's not all. Without bees, it's not just crops that would vanish. Wild flowering plants, the ones that form the foundation of ecosystems, would disappear. Following them, the insects and birds that feed on these plants would vanish. Then, the predators that feed on those birds and insects would be gone. The chain collapses from the bottom up. A single hive of honeybees pollinates an area of 5 to 10 square kilometers over a season. The economic value of the pollination that bees provide for global agriculture is estimated at around $250 billion annually. This is a service that nature provides for free, as long as bees are alive. In the U.S., bee pollination is valued at $15 to $20 billion a year. Every almond orchard in California, the largest producer of almonds in the world, depends entirely on rented hives. Farmers pay beekeepers to bring hives in during the blooming season. Without this, there will be no harvest. When bees disappear from an area, humans sometimes take over pollination by hand. In China's Sichuan province, where bees vanished due to the uncontrolled use of pesticides, farmers pollinated apple orchards manually with brushes, flower by flower. This is not a hypothetical scenario. It happened. It is happening right now. Part 6. Why are bees disappearing? Since the early 2000s, a sharp decline in bee populations has been recorded worldwide. The phenomenon was named colony collapse disorder, CCD. Bees simply leave the hive and do not return. No dead bodies are found. The hive just becomes empty. In the U.S. alone, about 30% of all bee colonies died between 2006 and 2008. In some states, it was more than half. A similar picture is seen in Europe and Asia. There are several causes, and they act simultaneously, reinforcing one another. 1. Pesticides, especially neonicotinoids, a class of insecticides widely used in agriculture. They don't kill the bee instantly. They affect the nervous system chronically, disrupting navigation, memory, and learning ability. A bee treated with small doses of neonicotinoids loses its ability to find its way back to the hive. It simply fails to return because it cannot find its way home. This is exactly what colony collapse disorder is. In 2018, the European Union banned the outdoor use of the 3 most dangerous neonicotinoids. This was an important step, but in most countries around the world, these substances are still being used. The Varroa mite, Varroa destructor, a parasite that came from Asia. It feeds on the fat body of bees and their larvae, weakening their immune system and transmitting viruses. Today, Varroa is present in virtually every hive on the planet, with the exception of Australia and a few isolated territories. Without regular treatment, the mite destroys a colony within 2 to 3 years. Loss of habitat, monoculture agriculture, endless fields of wheat or corn, is a desert for bees. There is no diversity of flowering plants, meaning there is no food. Urbanization destroys meadows and blooming roadsides. Wild bees, which do not have hives, lose their nesting sites. Climate change. The blooming periods of plants are shifting. Bees, which are tied to a specific seasonal cycle, find themselves out of sync with flowers, arriving too early or too late, when nectar is either already gone or not yet available. Pathogens, fungal infections, viruses, and bacteria. Bees weakened by pesticides and Varroa are less able to resist diseases, and infections spread faster. Here is the second question for you. Have you noticed in recent years that there are fewer bees than in your childhood? Not just honeybees, but any insects on the street. Write down your thoughts. Part 7. What happens if bees go extinct? Year 1. Flowering agricultural crops yield a sharply reduced harvest. Fruits, berries, and nuts are in short supply. Prices soar. Farmers try to switch to manual pollination or use drones, but this is incomparably more expensive and slower. Years 2 and 3. Food shortages intensify. Many species of wild flowering plants disappear, followed by the insects and birds that depend on them. A cascading collapse of ecosystems begins. Years 4 and 5. The global food production system is on the brink of collapse. 1/3 of the human diet has vanished or become unaffordable for the majority. This is not science fiction. These are estimates from serious scientific organizations like the FAOUN and the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. But there is another side to this scenario. Humanity will adapt. Even now, robotic pollinators are being developed, tiny drones with sticky filaments that mimic the work of a bee. Work is already underway on artificial pollination by spraying pollen. Self-pollinating plant varieties are being bred. But all of this is expensive, slow, and only partial. Replacing 2 billion years of evolution that created the perfect pollination system is impossible in just a few years. Part 8. Fascinating facts about bees. Bees have existed for about 100 million years. The oldest fossilized bee was found in a piece of amber dating back 100 million years. Dinosaurs were still walking the earth, while bees were already pollinating flowers. A bee flies at a speed of about 24 kilometers per hour. In a single flight, it covers up to 3 kilometers from the hive. It makes several trips a day. The total flight path of a single bee over its lifetime is about 800 kilometers. A bee's wings beat about 230 times per second. This is exactly what creates the characteristic buzzing sound, a sound with a frequency of about 230 hertz. The queen emits a different, lower sound at around 208 hertz. Bees distinguish these sounds and react to them differently. Bees know how to count up to 4. Experiments have shown that they are capable of associating a quantity of objects with a symbol and choosing the correct answer. This places them on par with birds and some primates in terms of numerical abilities. Bees are capable of recognizing human faces. This was discovered by chance during experiments studying memory. Bees were trained to associate a specific face in a photograph with a reward. They remembered and distinguished one face from another with an accuracy of about 80%. A bee's brain weighs about 1 milligram. That is smaller than the comma at the end of a sentence. Yet it contains about 1 million neurons. For comparison, a human has about 86 billion. However, the density of information processed by this single milligram is astonishing. Bees make collective decisions through a method that scientists call swarm democracy. When a colony decides to relocate, several hundred scouts fly out to look for a new place. Upon returning, each performs a dance to support its choice. The better the location, the more energetic the dance. Other scouts fly out to check it and join the dance if they agree. Gradually, the majority supports one option. The swarm flies to the place voted for by the majority of the scouts. No one makes a decision single-handedly. No one has a veto right. It is pure horizontal democracy in a creature without a complex language. In winter, bees do not hibernate. They form a tight cluster. In the center is the queen. Around her are thousands of bees that vibrate their muscles without moving from their spot, generating heat. The temperature at the center of the cluster is maintained at around 35 degrees Celsius, even in the coldest frosts. Bees on the edge of the cluster gradually make their way to the center to warm up, while those who have warmed up move to the edge. They keep each other warm. A single hive produces between 20 and 50 kilograms of honey over the summer. The colony itself consumes about 20 kilograms during the winter, and the rest is taken by the beekeeper. This is exactly why beekeeping is possible without harming the colony. Bees produce more than they need. Here is the third question for you. Are there any beekeepers among you, or people whose families kept bees? Tell us what it's like from the inside. Conclusion. We are used to not noticing the bee, brushing it off, fearing its stinger, thinking about honey at breakfast, and not thinking about where it comes from. But every fruit you eat passed through a bee. Every flower you see exists thanks to a bee. Every tree in the orchard, every berry in the forest is the result of this work. 100 million years. While dinosaurs were born, lived, and went extinct, bees flew from flower to flower. While civilizations rose and fell, bees built theirs. While we argued about politics and technology, bees did what makes life on Earth in its current form possible. A single creature weighing 120 milligrams, with a brain weighing 1 milligram, without which a third of global food production collapses. If you want to do something after this video, plant flowers. Any flowers. Don't cut down dandelions too early. They are the first spring food for bees. Give up pesticides in your garden. If you find a swarm in your house, don't kill them. Call a beekeeper. They will take them away alive. This is not sentimentality. It is pragmatism. We quite literally need them. Subscribe to the Wild World channel. Leave a like if this video was useful for you, and write in the comments when you last saw a bee. Appendix to Part 2, The Birth of a Queen and the Swarm. One of the most fascinating processes in nature is the changing of the queen and swarming. When the old queen begins to age, or the colony becomes too large, worker bees build several queen cells, special, large cells, suspended vertically from the edges of the honeycombs. New queens grow inside them. The first one to emerge immediately inspects all the other queen cells and stings her rivals right through the wall while they are still inside. If two queens emerge at the same time, a fight to the death breaks out between them. The victorious young queen makes a nuptial flight. She rises high into the air, up to a height of 30 meters, and mates there with 10 to 20 drones from different families. Each drone dies immediately after mating. His reproductive organs remain inside the queen. In return, the queen receives a lifetime supply of seminal fluid, up to 5 years, and never mates again. Meanwhile, the old queen flies out of the hive along with half of the family. This is the swarm, a huge, dense cloud of 10,000 to 20,000 bees that temporarily settles on a branch or a fence in the form of a cluster. This is not aggression, it is relocation. The swarm is almost harmless at this moment. The bees have no hive to protect, and they are completely occupied with finding a new home. This is exactly the moment when the scouts work, and that swarm democracy we talked about takes place. Appendix to Part 3, Anatomy of the Honeycomb. Honeycombs are one of the most perfect architectural objects in nature. The hexagonal cell is no accidental shape. Mathematically, it is the optimal geometry. Maximum volume with minimum consumption of building material. Scientists proved this in 1999 when the so-called honeycomb conjecture was solved, a mathematical problem that had remained open for nearly 100 years. Bees arrived at this solution long before mathematicians. The walls of the cells have a thickness of about 0.07 millimeters. Despite this, 1 square meter of honeycomb can support a load of 25 kilograms. The ratio of construction weight to load capacity is one of the best in nature. The cells are not arranged horizontally, but at a slight upward angle of about 13 degrees. This is no accident. This tilt keeps the nectar from leaking out before the cell is sealed. Appendix to Part 5. Bees and Human History. Bees have accompanied humans from the very beginning of history. Rock paintings in Spain, made 8,000 years ago, depict a human harvesting honey from a wild hive. This is one of the oldest documented pieces of evidence of human interaction with bees. In ancient Egypt, the bee was a symbol of royal power and appeared in the hieroglyphic writing of the pharaoh's title. Egyptians kept hives in ceramic tubes and knew how to transport them up and down the Nile, following the blooming seasons. This was the first commercial beekeeping in history. In ancient Greece, honey was the food of the gods. Ambrosia, the food that granted immortality, was described as a supernaturally sweet substance. Hippocrates used honey to treat wounds and intestinal diseases. In medieval Europe, honey was the primary sweetener before the introduction of cane sugar. Beekeeping was an important part of monastic economies. The wax from the hives went toward church candles. This made bees quite literally a part of religious life. Mead is one of humanity's oldest alcoholic beverages. Traces of mead have been found in vessels dating back 9,000 years in China. In Norse mythology, mead is the drink of warriors in Valhalla. During World War I, when sugar supplies dwindled, Great Britain mobilized beekeepers to increase honey production. In besieged cities during World War II, hives were kept right on the roofs of buildings. Napoleon Bonaparte chose the bee as his personal symbol. It signified diligence, organization, and collective strength. Bees were embroidered onto his coronation robe. Appendix to Part 8. More facts. Bees do not sleep in the conventional sense. They have periods of rest. They remain still for a few hours, lowering their brain activity. However, they don't have full sleep like mammals do. Young bees rest randomly, while old forager bees do so more regularly at night. Bees sense the electric field of a flower. Each flower carries a weak negative electrical charge. A bee accumulates a positive charge during flight. Upon approaching a flower, an attraction occurs, and pollen literally jumps onto the bee. After a bee's visit, the electrical charge of the flower changes for about 20 minutes. This is a signal to other worker bees. Someone has just been here. There is little nectar. Fly further. Bees know how to solve the traveling salesman problem. This is a mathematical problem about finding the optimal route through multiple points, one of the classic computationally complex problems. Bees, when flying around multiple sources of nectar, intuitively choose a route close to the optimal one. Computers solve this problem by trial and error, while bees do it on the first try. The alarm pheromone in bees smells like bananas. If you are stung by a bee, the scent of a banana near a hive will attract others. It is not the best time to eat bananas near an apiary. A single teaspoon of honey contains the labor of about 12 bees over their entire lives. A 1-liter jar of honey represents about 80,000 kilometers of total flight path, which is roughly equal to circling the Earth twice. Appendix: Bees and modern technology. Scientists study bees not only to protect them, but also for inspiration. Swarm intelligence algorithms, mathematical models based on the behavior of scout bees, are used to optimize routes and logistics, distribute loads in computer networks, and manage drone swarms. Bee democracy turned out to be so effective that it was turned into a computer algorithm. Robotic pollinators already exist. Tiny drones with artificial fuzz are capable of transferring pollen from flower to flower. The Japanese company NIA developed such a drone back in 2017. While this is still a long way from the scale of live bees, work continues. Researchers at Harvard are creating a swarm of micro-drones called robo-bees. Each the size of a coin, they are learning to fly in groups, coordinate movements, and perform joint tasks. The inspiration came precisely from a bee swarm. Wax moth caterpillars, parasites of beehives, accidentally turned out to be capable of degrading polyethylene. Scientists suggest that the enzyme allowing them to digest wax also works on plastic. This discovery was made thanks to the study of the bee's enemies. A bee the size of a fingernail, weighing as much as a paperclip, turns out to be at the center of several scientific revolutions at once: ecology, mathematics, robotics, and medicine. All of this is the bee. For 100 million years, it has done its job. Quietly, without noise, without demanding attention. It is probably time we finally pay attention to it.